Welcome to Beaver Politics, more specifically the Navigation Station. That's my show. That's where I will be helping people to really find out about the resources and the solutions. I want to impart education, all related to the Canadian political landscape. And today's conversation is going to be about the feminist motto, the political is personal, and how to connect those things. I'd like to just start with a couple of, let's call them housekeeping things. If you tap on me, tapping is clapping. We want to get the likes up. I see they're at 1,800 right now. Thank you so much. But we really want to get up to that 10,000, 20,000 like area. So we got some work to do over the next 2 hours. And I want to remind people that up here is our goals for getting subscriptions, and you subscribe by just clicking in the comment section and go to make your comment and press on the star, and then you can subscribe, and you can offer gifts through the bar on the bottom of the TikTok screen. So I encourage gift giving, and I encourage likes more than anything, because it's going to get our show out into the algorithm, and that is important. I see that there's some guests here waiting to come in. I will accept the guests.
But she's liking it. She is perching on it and watching. And
last night, the two of them were playing.
And okay, Mrs. Radical, you're on. Mike is on.
He stopped in the middle of the floor, and you could see him looking around, and it was like, whoops, and up he got. And this one chased him and went, "Hey, just a minute here."
Yeah, I'm surprised.
There, it worked. The mute worked. So when we bring you up into the box right now, I guess I'm going to be using the mute button, and not to take offense to that, anybody. I just want to be able to control some of the sounds. And I'll start. I've got a little preamble I wanted to start with, and then I want to invite people up into the box. Subscribing, we're really doing well on our subscriptions. If you subscribe, you get access to our Discord. Our Discord is where people can meet in groups and have private conversations, maybe about the social justice activism you want to be involved in your community. Or maybe you want to post an article that you read about some political news, and we have our Discords. There's a room, or there's a section for every province in Canada. It's a way to talk outside of TikTok, because TikTok has limitations in terms of characters. So welcome to our Discord if you sign up for a subscription. And I believe that it's $4.49 a month, $3.99 for your first month, and then we go from there. Sorry, somebody was... Okay. So Mrs. Radical, we have you in the room. And I'm just going to go ahead with the conversation about that feminist motto, the political is personal. And it all sort of makes, it kind of is self-explanatory, but it was feminism that brought this motto, and a revolution was created using that slogan, so to speak. But it has lasted throughout time. And it is a feminist motto. And it really evolved in the late 60s out of the civil rights movement that was going on. It was the second wave of feminism, by the way, that brought this about. Let's start out with a definition of feminism. The first thing to know is that it is a political ideology. It's a political ideology. It isn't a movement. It's a way to understand how people are oppressed based on gender roles. That's what feminism is. It's not a man-hater organization. It's about the oppression of people. And people, the majority of people that are oppressed in terms of gender are women. So the focus became women, because that's where the problems lie. So there is a misunderstanding a lot of time that feminism is just about sort of women's empowerment, but it's much, much more than that, because women, we used to say women would never be healthy if men aren't healthy too, but now we understand there are more genders than just man and woman. So we want to look at all of the genders, and we want to understand what's oppressing them and what's not oppressing them. So thank you again for joining the live. I just want to remind people before we get started here to tapping is clapping, like the lives. Let's get those numbers on the go. Somebody keeps popping up into the box and I'm not quite sure how to bring them up. Mrs. Radical, I don't know if you can manage that. But I want to have conversations with people today. And the political is personal did evolve out of the second wave of the feminist movement. One thing I appreciate about the feminist movement, so how do you take this ideology and put it to action? It really is a political ideology. It's boots on the ground. And with the civil rights movement came the opportunity to have people become aware that politics affects their everyday life, that it affects everything from, I mean, being hungry is political. So it affects everything from your trip to the grocery store, perhaps your trip to a church, perhaps your trips to community centers, to your work environments. It's sort of like trying to get people to understand so that they can engage in their civic engagement becomes different. It becomes more empowered with the more knowledge they know about how our political systems actually come down to affecting our everyday life, our daily living activities. And that's really what I wanted to focus on here. And I was hoping for people to come up and join us and tell us your personal story. Tell us how that story connects to the politics. Does it connect to the healthcare system or maybe the income assistance system? Perhaps it's about not being able to get ahead in a job because of gender. I'm just going to read a couple of comments here. I don't mean to hit the join button while I'm waiting for a plumber. Okay. I can only stage a little plumber shows up. Okay. Well, Addict, how about we make you our first guest to, give some feedback about this conversation. And we know that you're going to have to go on the fly, and that's the everyday of life, right? And so I've taken off. Taking off your microphone, and I've also enabled your camera if you want to use it.
No, I'm good with the background.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming up.
Okay. I'm not sure. I came to learn today because I'm kind of still not sure, like, the connection with the feminism and the politics and how I can help. And I know it influences help for like low income and disabled people, but I'm not sure how it affects other situations. Like,
so the real truth in like, say, trying to impart a message here that's educational is understanding that you have dignity and that you have agency within the decisions that affect your everyday life. When you start to understand how the politics are affecting a certain situation, it helps you to step back from the personal responsibility you have in the outcome of that situation, and what is the responsibility of the system that you are engaging with. Because many systems talk down to people, especially if you're accessing an income assistance system, right? So if you can understand your rights and your responsibilities, and if you can understand the political piece that's impacting your life, it helps you to feel less low self-esteem. You become more self-aware that, hey, this isn't my fault. I provided them the documentation. This is the system's piece. once you start, and some people don't realize that. Some people just think it's all their fault, that they've done something wrong, and the system is the one who can be advantaged in that scenario. So trying to help people to understand where their politics is actually affecting their personal life, and some of the choices that they're making. So look at women with domestic violence issues, right? There's a lot of learning around being victimized, the court system, being re-victimized within the court system, or even before you get there, at the hospital perhaps, or at the police station, or when the police are at your door. So understanding how that politics of that particular agency or system is affecting. Oh, that means we got a gift somewhere. Yay! Thank you. Thank you. So that's the message that we want to bring out here today. And to start understanding how to connect those dots by listening to people's stories. Because people's stories and speaking with your own voice is what really promotes change. When you engage in the conversation, when you become, you've sort of got some, what do they call that? Money in the game, or you've got some, I don't know, there's a slogan that goes with that, but when you have personally invested into the learning piece, then that's when change occurs. Did I hit any nail on the head with that, or?
I think you did, but I guess I'm also trying to, because I'm pale-faced, I'm trying to learn the navigation, since like the big part of feminist was created before pale-faced were the picture of it. And I guess I'm wondering how we honor the indigenous and the black women and the Latino women and the Asian women that started the movement, where we have to thank them for making that step, so that when it comes to someone, sorry,
No, it's okay.
like someone like me, who, if it wasn't for someone like Crutches and Spice,
I don't know where those noises are coming from, truly. Truly, I don't. But,
they're the gifts. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much, people, for doing that.
I don't know how to mute those, but like Crutches and Spice on here,
Uh-huh.
she is a black disabled person that advocates and uses every source to teach how to talk, how to use the system, how to like get the help. And I see how I, as a pale person, I'm trying to do it so I don't get us in trouble. Pale person.
Okay, you can say you're white. I'm white. However you're
Well, sometimes the white word is flagged. That's why I say pale person.
Well, I don't know. I know some people are, I see lives where they're saying words that they supposed to have shut the live down over, and they continue on for quite a while. Quite a while. But I think, so can I ask you this?
Yes.
What do you think you have learned from Crutches, and what was the rest of her tag?
Crutches and Spice.
Crutches and Spice. I've seen quite a few videos. She speaks very intellectually, I must say. I appreciate that about her. What do you think what did you learn from listening to everything she had to say?
That if it wasn't for the fight of people of color, originally for the disabled, a lot of like what I get for help wouldn't even be thought of as help, because like even us, like Canada versus US for help, like it's still so hard for someone of color to get any help.
That's
And
true.
yet, though I don't see a lot of, I'm seeing it more now, but since I started this 25 years ago, pale people weren't standing up for anyone of color. Hi, Krista. Okay, Krista Fox is a huge
Yes.
advocate of everything.
Much respect
And
for the Fox. Yeah.
she's taught me so much of how to speak up so that Indigenous are getting the rights, because I shouldn't be the only one because I'm pale. Like, the people that were here first should be the ones that should be advocated so they get the rights. So I try and use my feminine voice to try and get everyone of female help and of the non-bearing of every gender. I have to remember
Right. You
gender.
want to keep it broader, and mostly because of the role that the color of your skin has played in the oppression of the people that are speaking out. And
Yes.
the appropriate thing to do is to encourage their opportunities to speak out and to let them lead the conversation. It's like I don't speak on Indigenous issues unless I'm invited into the conversation. And I wouldn't, I don't impose to be the expert there. I always approach those kind of situations with grace. That doesn't mean there isn't room to work in a larger umbrella based on gender. Because if you, for instance, all of the counter protests that were happening around the drag story time, you recognize that issues that were displayed there was hatred towards the LGBTQ2S plus community, but more specifically around the trans conversation and around the drag queens presenting as women. So that doesn't mean you couldn't support that you couldn't support that movement, but they welcomed that support. You would never go there and be the sole voice speaking on their behalf. You would let them speak in their moments of power that those protests allow for them. And if you're invited to, then you can speak, but it would be as a representative of who you are. And it gives honor, and it gives you're identifying that you understand that, and you're offering respect in doing so. So I encourage everybody to participate when invited to do so.
I just mentioned, like, because I'm allowed in, like, Krista's space and invited into those communities, they asked that we use the 2S first, because the Two-Spirit were here before the white people. And it was the white people that tried to oppress Two-Spirit in any non-white person genderization. So when we speak, even just the 2S LGBTQIA+, honoring them by saying Two-Spirit, we honor how, if it wasn't for them, we would still be kind of in the dark ages with being allowed to have any other gender. So can I just a question for everybody, if you're gonna say as Canadians, because we have amazing Two-Spirits that are on this platform that honor us with their knowledge on it all the time.
Absolutely, and here's the thing, is to have grace when people don't always get it right. And I appreciate the way that you sort of gave me more guidance on how to manage that. And I often will start with 2S as well, but it is, sometimes we do things by rote. So I don't mind being redirected into the, sort of like the, we're talking about politics, the politically correct way to present that, right? And I could say a land acknowledgement as well, because I'm on the Clately Tenay territory, and so I should do a land acknowledgement about that and be grateful for that. So I would be, you made a good point. You made a good point, and that is a political point, right? And that became very personal. So you learned about that, and now you wanted to share that. And, there's 17 other people in the room here that have now learned this, if they didn't already know it. So I appreciate that. I'm going to want to give somebody else an opportunity to talk. But I want to thank you. Are you going to hang out? Because maybe we go back and forth in conversation a bit.
Thank you. I'll hang out, and if I disappear, it's because the plumber guy came back.
Okay, fair enough on that. So Progressive, you've been here a while. Do you want to join the conversation?
Appreciate having me up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It kind of, I want to go back to my show last night on the Massey side, where I did speak about different things that my mom faced while I was growing up when she was raising me and my brother. And a lot of the trials and a lot of the hardships that she went through, I think, are part of how within society and really politics, there's still that gender-based role nonsense, for lack of better words, right? Because to the eyes of society, while she was doing everything she was doing and taking care of me and my brother, that's what was expected of her. And if she couldn't do it, or if she, went off the beaten trail, so to speak, from doing all those kind of gender labeled, responsibilities under being a mother, under, all that sort of stuff. She was criticized, as well as, going back to mentioned earlier about how the system is set up politically, whether you're talking about somebody who's on assistance of some sort, or, just looking to, at times, get some sort of grant from the government to better their situation. The red tape that's in there to make you feel bad, especially as a woman, to use such things, and that's directed right from, the system and the grants or what have you that is meant to help you. It really just beats people down in general, but towards women, it's amplified. And again, to bolster the point from earlier as well, I mean, you add different race or creed into that, and it gets worse and worse, right? So compounding issues that we really need to start looking at on provincial levels and federal levels to start busting up that way of doing things, and potentially put legislation or policy in place so that sort of crap just doesn't keep happening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, when we talk about, or why I brought in the feminist piece, is that feminism has the political ideology of feminism has been what is the driving force behind people. And most of feminism and ideology takes place in, let's say, academia and research. That's where most of that conversation happens. And then when you put the boots to the ground, is that people become more solid in why they are stuck in a system. Now, feminism identified patriarchy, right? Patriarchy in our systems, especially in our income assistance systems, where men had the upper hand because of the way that system devalued women. Like, women not being able to get credit cards till the late 70s, I believe, early 80s, women not being able to vote, women being seen as property. That women being seen as property thing, that went a long way. And there are many people in the world that still believe that. So knowing that the system comes to the table with some of these preconceived policies can help you to navigate the policies within that system. Because the thing to know is that legislation you cannot change, but policy you can. And so if you think that there's a policy or a piece that's going to oppress you as a woman, trying to, like your mom, raise a few kids, but not being able to be able to fill the gap at the end of the month if rent needed to be paid. Where did she have to go? And how did she have to grovel in order to get that money?
Absolutely. You know? Something, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to bring up the fact that in a lot of cases, we know that the younger generations are more progressive in mindset. So, there isn't such systemic or more inherent viewpoints that would be oppressors, so to speak, right? And my mother, being a good example for my point that I'm going to make, is that, as somebody who is up there in age now, absolutely, her generation was raised by a generation that the head of the household was the man. When something goes wrong, you go to the head of the household, right? So when things did happen and she couldn't make quote unquote ends meet or pay the bills, first person she went to was my grandfather, who was a very conservative man and, was very outdated in his thought processes, even, at his later age. And that just goes to show, like, moving forward, we really got to step up game in terms of getting the message out there to the older generations that still, in a lot of ways, need to bust out of that kind of construct and break free of that.
Yeah, I'd absolutely have to 100% agree with that. I mean, we are often carbon copies of the people that we say we want to never be like. And so self-exploration becomes a very big piece of this political, of the political being personal, because a lot of people never applied that to themselves. And it doesn't just happen during an election season and what we normally think of politics. It's about understanding how those politics affected hunger in your life, how those politics affected your ability to get daycare or to hold a job if you were pregnant. That's another thing women had to go through. It's an oppressive piece that women as a gender had to endure, right? And some women really bought into the fact that they shouldn't have credit, or that they don't, women are just fickle and that they're too emotional, and, all the sort of cliched messaging that people like myself grew up in. And I'm here. I'm valid. I'm the one that has had to overcome and deconstruct all this fucking bullshit, right? And that's why I come on here, is to be able to be strong in maintaining that. Because even though young people think that it doesn't exist, they are wrong about that. It still exists, and a lot of young people don't understand how they are oppressed. And well, if they tune into this show, they'll start to get a little piece of it. While I'm talking, I'm going to do the Beaver politics piece for the navigation station. And just remember, the gift giving goal is up here, and you can subscribe, and you subscribe by just clicking in the messages and then pressing the little star beside it, and it'll bring up the option, as well as when you give gifts, you can get that subscribe. And remember to liking, tapping is clapping. That's liking the show. We're up to 9,000. I gotta put glasses on. 9,500. Let's get over that 10,000 for sure. And share the like. We still have 16 people in the room. There's a lot more people up in the box. So Progressive Moose, thank you for your comments. I think it is important to know that our history is not that long ago. When you become 60, you start understanding that. And it's a little bit of a harder sell for younger people to, because 50 years ago is history to somebody in their 20s. But history is repeating itself now in that 80, 100-year cycle in terms of the rise of fascism. So it is important. It is important to start recognizing where these systems and the oppressiveness of these systems, because of gender, you've got to start analyzing. So I'll just leave with that. And the next person, I think Lori, let me see if you can undo your mic. Great. Lori, come in.
Yeah.
Welcome to the conversation.
Hi. Thank you for letting me up. I don't tend to do a lot of lives, but I do feel I have some value to add to the conversation because my mom was a woman of the 50s. She was a mom in the 50s. She had 5 kids. We were Roman Catholics raised in Quebec, South Shore, Montreal. And she was a very strong woman, thank goodness, because I've had to take bits and pieces from her, even though she's died a few years ago. I've had to use that strength to get me through some tough times. She was the one who drove. My dad didn't drive. My mom was the one who went out to work. My dad worked as well. As a matter of fact, he worked for George Weston in Longueuil, Quebec, because he had a factory there. At the time, they were good people. We got really good treats from them, and I thank them a lot. Now I don't like them so much anymore.
Well,
But
things change, don't they?
But things change. Things change, and they've become billionaires. I've yeah.
Absolutely. So, what was respected in your mom and dad's age and time that they lived in, and could celebrate and be proud of working in that space. Now, there's there's a tinge, there's a stank on that whole system. Now, we don't take it out on employees, of course, but employees that work in these systems need to be supported and to feel good about where they are at their lot in life, because we didn't create the systems. We didn't ask to be oppressed. I didn't ask for Walmart to become what it is. I just am forced to shop there because of where I live financially. And nobody should be made to feel ashamed of that. When you have more money, you can shop differently, or perhaps, well, like people with disabilities. You don't always you can't just run out to a little small store or like the conversation around transportation and mobility and all those things have to be considered, as well as finances. So I don't feel bad at all about having to engage in shopping at Galen Weston's superstore, or the Waltons that own Walmart. It is something I when I first learned about how these grocers oppress us and price gouge, and how they put out small businesses. Now, that's a political piece, right? That's a political piece. But the society may not have understood the full fallout of what it would mean to have a store like that move in. And small businesses may have shown up at some of the city council's meetings to, when they were amending bylaws that would allow these big conglomerates in, but the whole community didn't show up, right? And I think that the more you know, the more you can make choices about where you can be and not be feeling guilty or shame or anything like that around it.
I don't feel too bad, actually. My dad, unfortunately, died accidentally when I was 11. I was the second female in line. Let's just say I had an older sister, so we had to take on a lot of responsibility. I have to say, though, just to reach back into my mom's past, she decided that she wasn't going to follow the Roman Catholic Church's birth control laws, which was don't use birth control. My sister was a twin, my oldest sister, so she actually had 6 kids. But my mom decided after my youngest sister was born, and she cried a heck of a lot, she wasn't having any more. So she went out and got herself a diaphragm. The heck with the priest, So I appreciate the strong French Canadian ethic she had, because I tell you, if she hadn't have done that, I don't know how we would have ended up. But also talking about that, I, in later years, got married. I got married at 21. We bought a house. Fortunately, we were able to. And then we didn't have children for 9 years, so we traveled a lot. My ex-husband was transferred to Vancouver. I had my son there, and then we were transferred to Calgary. I had my daughter there. When she was very young, we got divorced, unfortunately. So I moved back to Quebec, but I moved to where I'm living now, just on the border of Ottawa. And when I went to apply for a credit card, even though I had owned a house, I was on the deed in Calgary, I couldn't get a credit card.
Isn't
It
that
wouldn't let me get a credit card. And it was really hard. I had to fight like heck just to get a credit card, even though I had an
hard?
excellent credit rating. It's not fair, you
So
know?
at the time, did you understand how our political realm was influencing that that awful situation that you had to go through?
Uh, I didn't I don't know how much I thought about it, but I was a feminist because we're four females in my house, and my poor brother in the middle. And he's very gentle but smart, and he just minded his own business and got along with us because that was for this was for his survival. He survived. And
Girls,
yeah,
right?
I didn't think about it so much. I guess maybe I was a little bit stronger than I thought. I never got into it till later, uh, till I worked through my single parenting years, where I've had to fight for a lot of things. My daughter has had a lot of illness. She's been in the hospital a lot. She's doing well right now. She's beautiful, healthy, works out, but she has chronic kidney disease. And
Sorry.
I've had to fight with doctors all along because they don't always do what you'd like them to do and what you think they should be doing. And I really had an uphill battle in that respect. It was hard.
Medical system can take a lot of, like, supposed to make you healthy, but my goodness, there's a lot of unhealthy outcomes when you engage in that system. But politics of regulations, right? And it's also the politics of the doctor sitting in front of you, whether they'll hear your voice or not. I know women struggle in those situations, but men do too, and all genders, especially all genders. What we have to do is we have to go into these systems and make sure that they're not regulating that is going to oppress a certain gender. I want to give an example of that. So up until like only 20 years ago in British Columbia here, if you were at a university hospital or any kind of training hospital as a woman, when you signed the surgery papers to, give them consent, or, if you die, they're not going to be responsible, is mostly what those papers are. However, there's also this little clause in there that allowed them, while you are unconscious, to have doctors come in and learn how to do pap tests. Oh, yes, this is not long ago. Oh, yes. So that is one of the gendered, oppressive political pieces that women who work in the healthcare system wanted to shift. And so they had to become active, and they had to identify this oppressive piece. They had to justify the oppressive piece, move it forward, and get it to the CEOs and to the MLAs, because this is a provincial issue. They had to get it to those levels in order to shift how they do that practice. And it has shifted. I don't know of any place still doing it, but it's one of those little not talked about things. But women had to go out and be proactive to stop that oppressive thing within that healthcare system. For men, often their journey is supported in these political systems. They get more power in the political systems. The politics of healthcare, for example, heart and stroke research has only been done on men. It has until recently started to consider the gender piece, and not just the two genders. That new conversation is opening up everywhere in terms of research. Going back and looking at old research, considering the new gender pieces now. I mean, when you get into the medical research, they're talking about genes and chromosomes and stuff like that. They have to reevaluate a lot of the information. But it is a piece where men didn't have to worry. So they never thought about it, right? They never thought about the fact that all the research is being done on just their gender. And the men who figure it out, well, then they have to join in with the forces of the women doing the activism.
So that's like men being in the delivery room and asking the doctor to put an extra stitch in to tighten things up after a woman gives birth vaginally. And I mean, that is disgusting. But I think it still occurs.
That's the kind of thing you have to explore. Men can go in, and like another example is being allowed the autonomy to be what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say sterilized. That they can have their thing, get snipped, tied really, because it can be undone. But if a woman went in and asked for, her ovaries to be tied off or her ovaries to be tied off, she wasn't allowed, right? And often the husband had to be consulted on that, or the father would have to be consulted on that. And so those are the things that still exist and permeate our medical system. But if you're a woman and you start becoming aware that this political system, the politics of the person in front of me, the politics of the system, start understanding where your rights and your responsibilities take place within that interaction, and understanding that there is this phenomenon taking place will help you to walk through it. It should empower you. It should give you your body autonomy you need, for instance, in a medical system. It should give you the autonomy you need in an income assistance system, right? Instead of always with our systems with a downward approach. Okay, I'm going to move on and invite somebody to have a conversation.
Thank
you, Lori. Thank you. I appreciate your story, and I appreciate it because there's many of us who've lived that history as well.
Good.
Okay, so I'm not sure.
Can I just respond?
What's that?
It's Addicted Bear. Can I just respond, please?
Sure.
Because with the women in medical and them being able to do that procedure while we're under for anything, we now have to be proactive before going for any surgery. And as a person with disabilities, when I asked to be fixed, the guy was like, totally get it. I get why you don't want to have children right away. And yet my friends, same age, asked, and they were told not till they were married, not till they had so many children, not till this, not till that. But my doctor looked at me, he looked at me using a cane, he looked at my chart of mental illness, and he's like, okay, when do you want to get in?
Right. And how many people who were deemed, that had autism and stuff like that they just sterilized and didn't even tell them.
Yeah, right? And I was going to say, and people of color, because they were still doing it to Indigenous women in BC around the same time the story came out about that woman getting a pap test done when she was under.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still doing it without, and they can still, to this day, if they're in there and they have a C-section, they have to make sure someone's making sure to advocate that they don't lose that right, or their children, because they still have birth announcements, and due to patriarchy, they pale people can still come in and take their children because of the color of their skin. And to me, that's still how we are not standing up feminists for all women give birth.
Well,
I just had to add that.
I would push back on that a little bit. I think the foundation is gender, and then you add racism, you can add homophobia, all the isms, all the isms.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, there's a foundational oppressive layer of gender that is an undercurrent to all these other things. So that doctor, like you said, to the other woman, fine, go ahead. Or maybe your husband would have to be involved in many of the cases, but because of your disability, there was an opinion, and there was an assessment made in that doctor's office, and likely with their biases brought to the table was where that decision came from more than anything else. So if you know your rights at that moment, if you know that that doctor is not behaving in a way that's non-oppressive, and some doctors they just do it by rote. So they don't even know, and their practice needs to be challenged, right? So I get what you're saying around the racism and around the disability pieces, but this conversation here is about gender, and I just want you to, if you can go away with one thing, to realize that, the gender piece is an undercurrent to all these other layers of the oppression spectrum that people are facing. Thank you. Thank you for your conversation on spurs on some great, it's great. Your stories really confirmed, what we're talking about here, and making the dots, connecting the political to the personal. Political doesn't just have to be Justin Trudeau and Tiny Trump and, Doug Ford for the provincial or Danielle Steele. The politics of our systems are very important as well. I'm not sure if Desiree or if Grandma was in first. Do either of you want to just take your mic off and join the conversation?
Hi there.
Hi, Desiree. Thank you.
Hi. So I want to push back a little bit on the gender because as a Black woman, you cannot separate my Blackness from my womanness. So when I walk into a doctor's office, the first thing they see before they see that I'm a woman is that I'm a Black woman. Okay, so that is the first piece that colors the doctor's thinking before even being a woman. I was raised in a very feminist household. Single mom, 2 girls, 60s and 70s. And, I saw her fight, and I saw the battles right up through to the 80s. And her battles, feminism is a 2-tiered ideology and often does not include anybody other than YT genders. Okay? Womanism, which is, I'm a womanist, I'm not a feminist. Womanism is inclusive of genders. Somebody's nationality, race, color. It is a more inclusive ideology. And if anybody wants to read more about that, the author to start with is Alice Walker.
Oh, I love Alice Walker's readings. Yes.
Right. So and I've also worked in the medical field. I'm a medical administrative assistant. So I have some of the stuff that I have seen, and I'm not the doctor, so I can't say put the husband in check, right? When the husband starts talking for his wife, when she quite clearly wants to answer for herself, and some of that cultural, so you have to navigate that culture to empower the woman to have a voice. Whether it means, the husband, the doctor tells the husband to stay out of the room. It's not, feminism is kind of outdated to me. It's a fight against the patriarchy, whereas womanism is more in line with what's going on today with genders.
Okay, so I hear your messaging. It's not something I'm unfamiliar with, but I think as movements kind of stem out of the feminist world, the feminism as an ideology, if you take it into a different direction, I don't see a problem with that. Feminism is now technically in its fourth wave, possibly the fifth wave. I haven't studied it lately. But the second wave of feminism, which was a result of understanding that Black women were not part of the conversation, and it was the civil rights movement. It really was about Black power that brought this whole conversation about the political is personal to move forward.
Okay.
Right? So it was inclusive and starting to understand that racism was not considered in, like, let's just say the research up to date around the gender oppression. And so now, but it expanded. It expanded, and I have read lots of feminist Black women that, that understand that there's just layers to their oppression. And the doctor may have been more, let's just say, more racist than they were misogynist when you enter a room. And so people can be more racist than they are misogynistic. And so they identify you as a Black woman, for instance. That's going to be the connection for that person that's in front of you, right? But I would push back that feminism, the one thing I appreciate about it is that it evolves and that it changes and shifts as the social structures and the research become more in depth. And they now understand the intersectionality of gender is something that's been studied now for years under feminism. So I would push back another word, so womanism, but have you heard of humanism?
Yes.
Okay, so humanism is saying the exact same message, that feminism is antiquated, that it's passé, it's old, it's not responding to the current realm of how we understand gender. And I just would push back about that because there is research being done. And so it is expanding its roles. I sat on a women's resource board, and we used to do, we called it the unfashioned show. And so women would come out and they'd be dressed in a way that describes their oppression, and then they would disrobe and they would celebrate however they wanted to dress about, overcome whatever their story was to overcome. And there was somebody who was transgender wanting to be a part of the show, and we had somebody walk out of the boardroom and they identified as a strong feminist. But not everybody learns everything at the same time. And so I think, when a humanist theory comes around that, they've missed something in the realm of feminism that they want to identify, or maybe, just maybe, their own internalized misogyny, they don't want to connect that the feminist movement has already gotten there, that they're already doing doing these pieces.
Do you realize that black feminism came before white feminism?
Well,
It was around before then, and black women have always had to fight before white feminism was a thing. Always,
yes.
you know? And so that you can't negate the struggle that black women had and put white feminism above that.
No, you can't. And anybody who's
But you
doing
just
that
did.
is not truly espousing what today's feminism is all about. I
But
realize that some people got stuck in the first wave, or some people are stuck in the second wave of feminism. But today's current structure around feminism is more inclusive and is you know, it is morphing as our societal needs are bringing these things out. And of course, women, black women, they struggled, to get their rights and to not be oppressed anymore, right? But white women went through a similar journey, and the whole feminist movement.
But white women's journey did not include black women.
No, it
It
did
wasn't
not.
until womanism came along that included everybody. And that's why feminism, the idea of feminism, and that's why I don't say I'm a feminist, even though I was raised by one, because feminism is a very narrow scope compared to womanism.
Yeah, okay, so I respect, and I'll let your opinion be what it is. But I'm not there yet. I see feminism in a much broader context. And what I'd like to do, like I'm doing today, is celebrate this piece of the feminist movement that is still applicable today. Now, it may not be, and because of, what's the name of the woman? Her name, I wrote down. Carol Hanisch. Do you know that name? Hanisch.
No.
The black woman in the civil rights that was a feminist, identified as a feminist, and was very much responsible for the motto, "The political is personal," came from a black woman, right, who joined forces under the feminist umbrella. And so it's not to say that black women didn't struggle, but were they identifying as a feminist movement before? Like, was that label the feminist movement? Or was it, what was it called? If it was a movement. Was it called womanism?
Because black women have had this struggle since, the abolishment of slavery, right? So we did not have a label for it. It was called survival.
Right.
We didn't need to put a label on it.
Right.
Period. And we were just trying to get by and do our thing. And then somebody in hindsight recognized it as black feminism. But it's not when you talk over what I've said, it negates everything that came before white feminism.
Right. So I believe there's a lot of movements that came before white feminism. So I don't want to negate anybody's movement. I know there's been a lot of women oppressed around the world that have way worse oppression than, say, what we experience here in this first world country. And I say that with quotes, because I don't believe there's, capitalism structures this first, third world conversation. However, women have been fighting since the biblical times to try and get their gender role to be respected, and they always were looking for ways to survive their system, whatever it was in. And feminism is a political ideology, and it may not have been labeled until white women started doing their thing about research, and it became a political ideology. But the reason the ideology happened was because of all the struggles, right? Everybody's struggles. White women got together. Why? Because they had more resources, because they had more privilege in their life to be able to even go and start thinking about these spaces. And it's an ideology. It isn't the movement itself, right? So in instilling knowledge about where the gender oppression piece comes into your life, there's where feminism is. And that's what I've always appreciated about it, and also about how it has changed over time. But I do know that women and women's movements existed before feminist movement. The feminist movement came out of the movement for the SPCA, right? That's where the white feminist movement came out of. And because they were white, the tag that got attached to their work is what took off. It was their privilege, right? It wasn't the work of Black women at the time that was being put out there and celebrated, let's say. It was about the white.
Because there was still a racial divide.
Correct. There was still a racial divide at that point. So over time, I have seen that racial divide lessen, and I have seen the intersectionality of more genders being accepted. But even along the way, white women in the feminist movement have rejected these messages. But there are plenty that don't. And there is plenty of research that supports what you're talking about, right? That supports and identifies that the white feminist movement did damage along the way by excluding the realities of women's experience around racism.
Which is why I will never claim to be a feminist. Because of that damage.
Yeah,
it still does damage.
But it's not like that anymore. If you comment, so to me, you're talking about things that exist in today's world, but that when you go to where does the ideology of feminism comes from? It happens in academia mostly, and it happens in research, and it's those places that are making the shifts. But it takes time for a research or academia to flow out into society. And I read the scholarly articles that are, I read some stuff to get ready for the conversation today, and it is happening. So I have, as a woman, joined the feminist movement, not even understanding the race divide existed within the movement, right? And then when I found out, I had to internalize and understand where my level of racism existed. And I think everybody has to make that journey. If you start identifying as a feminist, then I think that's part of the journey you have to make. You have to explore your own internalized racism, homophobia-ism. You have to internalize your own level of misogyny. So that's the lessons that I've learned in my study of feminism. People's lived experiences, though, can conflict with that. They can conflict with that. And I never want to put anybody else's story or any other movement. I can fully acknowledge that Black women were organized. I mean, look at the Underground Railway system. That was more than, thanks for the gifts, whoever sent that. That was activism in its finest. That's one of its finest examples. And it was happening before white women were doing these things, right? White women were doing this from a place of privilege, more so than other genders. And then, of course, we have a capitalist conversation to add to this, because the political hunger, you're hungry, there's a political connection to that, right? And really, that's the conversation here today, is just to try to get people to understand that gender matters, and the system you may be in contact with could be oppressing you because of your gender. There's also room for conversation that you're being oppressed because of your race. And it really, I think there's lots of really great examples that still exist today. The fight exists. We're living it. We're out here trying to combat it right now. So I do welcome the conversation and your pushback, and I appreciated how respectful you were in bringing this conversation to the table.
Yeah. At this point, I think where I am in my journey is more encompassing because I have left. Feminism is a proponent of womanism, so I'm not there. I have moved on to a wider horizon, so to speak. And my viewpoint encompasses far more women, genders, than feminism does. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on.
I'm not here trying to negate any of your conversation. I enjoy feminism as an ideology. I enjoy the strengths that it has given me in the way that I experience systems. I appreciate that it has brought me awareness about my levels of racism and homophobia, because that was definitely part of my younger days. But it's always about deconstructing and learning and being open to conversation. And that's how I've envisioned, that's the vision of feminism that's come into my world.
And I guess, I grew up with some advantages that other people didn't get. My mother still is, she's a feminist. My mother is also a lesbian. My mother is YT, raised 2 black daughters. So my starting point in life was vastly different than your starting point.
Absolutely.
And I've never had the luxury to look at the world through a narrow lens, like ever, so going into a workplace or going into a doctor or going into, I just want to tell the story when I was 19 and the boyfriend I had at the time was accused of something and we had to go to court. Okay. And I was his witness because I was there. None of what the other person said happened. And so I went in front of the judge and I said, you have to swear on the Bible, blah, blah, blah. And, I said to him, I don't drink alcohol. 19 years old. But you want to make a bet, the first thing that he saw was my color. And then he saw me as a woman. And then he saw me as a teenager. And threatened to charge me with perjury.
I believe that racism, that racism can be the first point of contact for the oppression. Absolutely, I don't deny that. But as the people in the comments, it seems like women have always been built to fight, and we have to fight even today. As we lose ground in the rise of fascism here in Canada, which is very linked into the rise of evangelicalism, that gender role piece becomes front and center again. The racism piece is also a big piece of the conversation, especially if you're the person wearing the different color than white in a society where whites rule. Right? We're still the majority. Caucasians are still the majority here in Canada. Whites still hold all the power positions here in Canada. So the racial divide is still very, very huge. And the divide between men and women in our political system is still very, very huge. There's a lot of work to do, isn't there? Because it seems to all be coming back to a place where we had brought it to a place where, it was, you don't behave in certain ways, and now it seems like everything is off the table, right? Racism is something that can be freely expressed. Misogyny can be freely expressed. Homophobia.
Not well. I mean, to a point. I lost a job because somebody in the lunchroom had started something about. I can't remember exactly if it was about an indigenous person or, a black person in the States, and I corrected her. I was gentle about it, but she was in tears, a white woman.
Okay.
And she went running to my boss, even though she was her boss. I'm in Alberta, right? So I was working at an inner city clinic
Okay.
that, 90% of the patients were unhoused.
Right.
And most of them were indigenous. And this woman made this blanket statement, and I'm not going to be quiet. I'm just not, But what I said to her was, in the gentlest words I could possibly, and anybody who knows me knows I am not gentle when it comes to racism. And she burst into tears, and then she left the room. And next thing I know, I'm in a meeting, a review meeting. And the person worked for the lab. They didn't even work. Like, the lab was in the building, but that wasn't her boss. Was not my boss. It was two different organizations. And I lost my job over that. And nobody came to me and asked me what the conversation was about.
And you that with racism, that gender didn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't.
It did in the end. Well, yes and no, right? But, and I've seen, my mother is YT. I've seen her use her privilege by using tears against other people.
Okay.
Who are like, there's an inherent privilege in being a YT person, even in the realm of feminism.
Say that again.
There is privilege that YT women have in the realm of feminism.
Absolutely, white women have privilege. It's just that's the racist piece, right? That's the racism within our system, is that there's still privilege for white women. Something I notice made me think of it on TikTok here, is a lot of people will blame the ideology that someone is espousing to for their bad behavior. So, example, sometimes people DM each other and they say, things that maybe shouldn't be put out in public. And then the two people have a fight, and one of them starts coming on TikTok and makes a big TikTok about it and puts their personal DMs up on the screen for everybody to read and see that they engaged in some level of arseholery, let's call it. And they go, that person's a feminist, and feminists are blah, 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 when feminism had nothing to do with the shitty behavior that person did in betraying the confidence of whoever put that DM into a private space. Or they're labeling the feminism as the problem, but feminism doesn't teach you to behave that way. Feminism doesn't say things like that. So I think a lot of people it's an easy scapegoat to use feminism when really it's just people behaving badly. And I see it here all the time. I'm not going to be a feminist. This feminist treated me badly. But really, you got to look at what the ideology is. So feminism, that's what it is. It's a political ideology. it's about the exploration of oppression of gender. Now, gender has, there's layers of oppression for people, but this one explores the oppression of gender. And why can't that just stand for what it is? Racism explores oppression from that lens. Nobody's saying you can't be, racism no longer is applicable today. We have progressed into this other level of what we're facing. I have never heard that. Racism has always just been the same thing. There's no waves of it, the way that the feminist movement has gone through waves, because they have been too narrow in their focus. First about white women, right? They didn't even think about all the other races. The other movements had not gotten to the point where they had the same opportunity to spread their word. And I'm glad that racism as a movement is loud, proud, strong. The civil rights movement really shifted things in our modern world, right? In our modern world. And so I still, like I said, I just feel sometimes feminism is used as a scapegoat. And I'm not saying that you're doing that here in this moment, but I feel that. I've heard, people be described, shitty people do shitty things, and all they're talking about is the feminist piece of their life. That's not what feminism teaches. Anyway, is there any last thoughts you'd like to share?
Sorry?
Is there a last thought? I want to move on to another guest.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're gonna, I mean, at this point, I think we're gonna have to
agree to disagree.
Just not agree to disagree, but I will have to, the way I see it is I will have to not try to explain to anybody how feminism in from where I'm looking at and from what my experience is still such a narrow viewpoint.
I can listen to what you said, and I can agree with what you said. It hasn't shifted my understanding of what feminism is or its relevance today, because we are fighting the fight of gender more today than we have in the past. And I know that's true for the racism as well, especially in the United States. Another whole conversation pours up. I mean, Black people in Canada experience the same bullshit, because of why? Because there's more white people in power in Canada. Because our systems and the people who run the systems have not explored their point of view around gender or their point of view around racism. So we're always going to have these conversations, hopefully, just to get people started to think about it.
I want to thank you for speaking out because, for one, this is the first time I've actually heard your voice, so I'm excited. But two, I actually get to hear you say how your name is pronounced because I love your name. But three, we've been having conversations, and at this point, I like listening today, I feel like I hear more of what you're saying by your experiences, and it's making me rethink a lot of even what I've talked to you about, but
yeah,
how we really haven't made that step, and we're still not acknowledging how much it's in Canada. We still have that not in my backyard attitude.
it doesn't happen here. Yeah.
And to hear you talk, it's really eye-opening, I think, to a lot of us to realize it is in our backyard. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the conversation. And you're right. None of this stuff is not in our backyard. We're facing it all over again. And it's not just because of gender. It is because of things like racism. We live in a colonial system, an active, full force colonial system that's still oppressing Indigenous people in our country, still oppressing Black people in our country, so or other races as well, and other genders. So we're all being oppressed by these political systems, by the players in the political systems, and our own personal interactions with who we've come in contact with really, from what I'm hearing from the two, from you, Addicted, I don't see your whole name, and you, Desiree, is I'm hearing, and Lori as well, is I'm hearing how the the pieces that you've come into contact with have really defined your view of the world, right? Like your Desiree, your take on womanism over feminism makes total sense for the journey that you've experienced, right? And I feel the same way about Indigenous people. I mean, those factors are what's impacting their life every day more than their gender, perhaps. But nonetheless, this conversation is about gender. And I am going to move on and welcome you back to talk about other subjects on the navigation station here every Thursday afternoon. I appreciated the way you have shared your personal stories. And I'm going to take a lesson, and the next time I speak of the feminist movement, I am going to, because of North America and where we live and everything, I am going to speak of the movements before the white feminist movement occurred, because I should give homage to the Black women who were doing the struggle. We just didn't have a label for it. The Indigenous people who were doing the struggle and didn't have, doing the activism, but didn't have the label for it the way we do with the white feminist movement. So I'll take that away today.
Thank you.
All right, so then let's move on to Glenn Dam. And thank you for waiting as long as you have. It looks like your mic is muted. There we go. I got your mic off. Oh, I think you have to click it on your side now, because I took the mic. Oh, it's still on. There. I have your microphone is operating now.
Thank you for letting me join the conversation.
All right.
So I don't have a lot of time left. I'll try to be as quick as possible here. I'm sort of conflicted. So I was raised back in the 70s. My mom was a single mom. My father died. I was 5. My brother was 8, and my other brother was 1. And we were raised that the woman stays home, she takes care of the house and the children. So when my father died, we packed up, we left, we were living in Edmonton. We moved to where Baba lived, my grandmother. So we moved to where Baba lived. Baba quit her job, she was working, and she stayed home with us so that Mom could go to work and support the family, because that's how we were raised. There was always a motherly role in the house. So then when I got married in 1990, my husband, who is 10 years older than me, was raised under the same conditions. Mom stayed home. She was the provider, or the housekeeper, when the husband was the provider. So we went with that. I have 4 children. I stayed home. I'm still at home. My children are all grown now. My husband provides for the family. I take care of the house, the meals, the children. And I'm very fortunate that I have that position. And I can appreciate my friends who all have careers, and I don't want my daughters to be reliant on a man like I am. Even though I'm very fortunate, but at the same time, I do want to have grandchildren that are taken care of by a mother or a father, right? But
Mhm.
being taken care of a family member, and so it's very conflicting for me because I appreciate feminism, absolutely. It's benefited me and my daughters and my every woman that I know in my life. But at the same time, I'm kind of stuck in the core values that I was raised with. So to me, it's like a catch 22. I feel hypocritical for wanting the same values that I was raised in for my children, but also wanting the women of the world to have freedom and have rights. And it's just it's confusing for me. And I struggle with it daily.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't I don't think that's an uncommon experience, and I think you should celebrate the value system that you connect with, as long as it's not oppressive to people, right? And you have found a way to be comfortable without oppressing people under those values. So as long as you're not oppressing somebody because of the way you think or because of your value system, then you're okay. You know,
Well,
you're okay. And it's about
both
jealousy.
both of my adult daughters have informed me, they're both in their 30s. They have
Mhm.
both informed me they do not want children at all. And they are strong, independent women. And I'm happy for them. I'm thrilled with that. And I would not tell them any other way that you choose your path in life and what makes you happy. But it does break my heart. That's where it's very conflicting.
So I can understand. I would love to have a grandchild, but my son is like, nope, not happening, you know?
Yeah, so I just find it's a difficult path. And how do you relate to society when you've been raised so one-sided, but you want to be open to all angles? I try, I really do try, but like my sons now, they're both in their 20s and they talk about they would like children.
Mhm.
And they say, but we have to find moms that will stay home and take care of our children. And that bothers me. And it's like, well, no, that's not necessarily important, but that's how they were raised. And so it's like, I don't know if I raised my children right or if I messed them up, because I don't want my children or my sons thinking that their wives have to stay home full time. And, that has to be their wife's decision. So
Is that message imparted to them?
I,
What you've just said out loud here,
right.
do you say that to your sons?
I do. I tell my children, both my sons, I tell them, if your wife wants to work, you'll let her work. And then it's like, well, who will take care of the children? And I said, I will. That's me being selfish.
It's
But
practical too.
but but they said, but mom, you were always home with us, like growing up, and wouldn't it be nice if your grandkids had somebody at home that they could rely on 24/7? And so and I said, yeah, I get that, but that's where I'm very conflicted.
Well,
I see
as
both
long
sides
as
of the path.
there's absolutely no reason why a woman shouldn't be able to engage in the traditional family where I stay at home and my spouse is the one who's working, because, the 2S LGBTQ community is needs to be considered in this conversation as well. But
Oh, absolutely.
traditionally, as long as the main problem for, or one of the main problems, this is the political piece, is they never had financial security without their husbands. So how could they attain autonomy around their financial security while still in this traditional role of staying home with the kids? Because that reality of women never being able to make a choice about leaving their husband or leaving a bad situation or restructuring how the day-to-day world looks often was trapped. Women were trapped in that traditional role because of the financial abuse that would be going on alongside it. These days, there's a ways for couples to sit down, have that conversation, and protect each other financially. I'm going to stay home and raise the kids while you go out and make the money. The reason you can make the money is because I'm staying home and raising the kids. Then this is the way it's going to be redistributed if something goes sideways, right? Or I am not going to have to beg you for grocery money or beg you for the needs that I have to operate the household day to day. If that traditional role is what is going to be chosen to be engaged in, because the role itself doesn't necessarily come with oppression. It's those oppressive pieces that have to be explored. So maybe the conflict you're feeling, maybe some of it, and I'm only going to get personal here, but it's not my right to, as much as I wish and want, it's not my right or place. So I've just had to suck it up, whether I like it or not. And my son's never been like as blunt as that. But for me, I don't know that I'll ever let go deep down inside of wanting the desire. And I don't need to apologize for that anymore. And I don't need to explain it. Maybe take that from this, because you have seen the good and your children have seen the good in the way that traditional role can play out, right? It's only if there's abuse and oppression is occurring because of it.
Thank you. I've never looked at it from that point of view, but I appreciate that so very much.
You're welcome.
Again, I'm very fortunate. My husband is great. The finances are up and down, but we work on it together. So I'm very fortunate, and I hope that my children end up in fortunate relationships, be it the same-sex relationship or boy-girl type relationship. I'm fine with either or. My husband's fine with either or. But again, it's just hard when you've been raised and you're older, such as my husband and I are, to grasp on to new ideas, I guess.
Just be easy on yourself, right? Just you don't apologize for pieces of information you didn't have in the past, right? You just have to take the best and leave the rest. I didn't understand when I was being homophobic or when I was engaging in racism or ableism. It's one that is very, very tough for me. I always, it's easy to say the word using ableism it's almost like the first swear word we were allowed to say, because we could call people stupid and it wasn't considered a swear word. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So ableism is one of those things that's been ingrained since childhood. And if you start looking at people's ability to change, what they learn in their childhood, their social conditioning, is very, very difficult to undo. Indoctrination, like religion is a good example, it's very difficult to step away and look at that. There's a comment that went by that asked me why I referred to it as being trapped. I use the word trapped only if there's an oppressive situation taking place. Then you're trapped in it, right? You have to, women who get away from the trap, from being, oppressed, that's great. But it's just a metaphor to be used alongside the conversation of oppression. You can have I am a stay-at-home woman who looks after the house when my husband would work, so I took on the more traditional role. I don't apologize for that, and I quite enjoy it. I love my little world where I can putter around and do housework, and I still am a valuable person to the world, right? So yeah, you take the best, you leave the rest. If you're somebody who's there's so many ways that women are oppressed in their traditional roles, but there's also ways that can be celebrated, and nobody needs to like not having kids. That's decision today can be more about more than gender. It's about financial constraints. It's about the geopolitical world we live in, where there's active.
Right now, it's the state of the world.
Yeah.
100%. They've
Yeah.
all said that. So,
Absolutely. Do you mind if I chime in quick, Mrs.?
Have a say.
Yeah, I just wanted, again, going back to my mother as, prime example that I have to look at as, a man that hasn't experienced any of this stuff. And thank you all for sharing. It really has been awesome to learn so much, hearing it from so many different perspectives. But to my point, like my mother was somebody, I spoke of my grandfather earlier, where because of the way she was raised by him, like when my parents got separated, he was livid, because to him it was, once you're married, that's all there is. Like there's no going back from that. Very, conservative, old timey, for lack of better words, point of view on things. And, my mom has been a very happy woman, and she's been very lucky with a lot of things. And I think a part of that is because she was inherently taught that once her marriage was done, there was nothing else. And she really hung on to that because that's what she was taught, being raised by my grandfather. And I think she used it to embolden and empower herself, and flip it to, if this is what it's going to be, I'm going to make the best of my life, with that being the case. So it kind of lightened
that piece of her story. She didn't think she could change, but what she could change and what she could celebrate, it happened, right? All of the strengths of that traditional role, but she wasn't able to, like, okay, I can leave and be successful, right? Maybe divorce and religion, Catholic, is that part of it? Some religions you're not allowed as a woman to divorce, right? It becomes part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. He wasn't a churchgoer, but he was definitely a God-fearing man, right? So that was one of the things that was very strong and prominent within how he raised his children. Mm-hmm. So,
and the social messaging back then of women, being divorced women in the 50s and 60s, 40s, what they had to deal with in terms of how people viewed them as, the risque women, or, just out flaunting yourself. There was so much sexism involved when women would step back and get divorced. And yet their oppression was so strong, they still did it. They would rather have had the people think that they are, if you're divorced in the Catholic Church, you can't remarry in the Catholic Church, right? You have to have what's called an annulment. These days, I just experienced somebody going through that. $4,000 to get an annulment, to find out, because 30 years ago you divorced somebody that was maybe assaulting you, right? But the church would not accept assault as an excuse to leave a relationship, would not accept financial abuse as a reason to leave the relationship. So many constraints got put on that gender role. Not just gender role is a social construct, right? So that's what we're talking about here. So that social construct, how does that oppress you? How does that influence the way the way that you connect politically to the world around you? how do you take your everyday life if you're a woman or a man or any gender that's struggling in poverty, right? And you're in the income assistance system. How does your gender affect the way you're being treated? How is your service delivery coming at you? And can you pick up on pieces that, pieces that you can change? Are you in a doctor's office that sees your race? How do you combat that, right? How do you push back on that because you felt that? And if you've had any level of intuition around it, if you can label it and you can look them in the eye, I mean, I'm an overweight person. I've lived in a large body all my life, and I have been fat shamed in doctor's office. But until I learned about fat shaming, until I knew the political piece that was influencing the relationship in that room, I absorbed that with shame, right? And now I can stand back and go, "Excuse me, did you just fat shame me, buddy?" And so those are the kinds of things in exploring the gender role with the realm that you're in. You can start to see where rules and regulations have been put in place because of your gender. And if that's what's oppressing you, if that's the oppressive piece in your life, then, hopefully learning that that's why you're being oppressed will help you to understand it's not your fault. You should not feel ashamed. You do not have to feel less than anybody because somebody is oppressing you based on your gender. And that's the message in connecting the political to the personal. Go ahead.
Real quick to Moose.
That's
My mother was raised Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And I think that is what was one of the proponents of her becoming a feminist and fighting back against what she saw happen between her mother and her father at home and how oppressive and unfair it was.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Roman Catholics, as well as I believe there's a couple other more prominent kind of sects of Christianity that also have kind of the same viewpoint on that sort of stuff too, right? So you're absolutely right. A lot of that sort of stuff is based on religious teachings or religious views more so than anything.
And she came out of that. She was so angry.
Yeah.
Angry, like palpable anger that she had towards that whole system. So we also had to navigate that as children. And it did have an effect on us in a way, but we grew up immersed in that, as opposed to having to fight our way out of it. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's where my experience and my viewpoint is so different, than other women who are feminists, being a womanist.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing if your female parent has been raised Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Being raised a Catholic and all, gender definitely, and gender roles, and not necessarily in my mother, but just watching the aunties or the cousins, and just at that time, how I was surrounded by Catholics. I remember the first time I met somebody who was Presbyterian. I was 13, and it was just like, oh, you're not Catholic? Like there was so much of a religious overtone to my gender deconstruction oppression. And the Catholic Church had a great deal to do with it. I mean, they're self-serving. They're no birth control and let's use the rhythm method ensures more Catholics are going to be born, right? So there's a whole political realm of conversation that lies there. It's happening, The Handmaid's Tale, that's happening in the United States because they want to repopulate white women they want to repopulate mostly with white women, right? So all of the Handmaid's Tale that's playing out is quite a frightening scenario for any gender outside of male, to not pay attention to. And it took years.
And in Georgia, there was just an egg farming thing busted. It was a whole bunch of women.
Yes, I've seen that.
It's like we're living several different timelines at the same time now.
Mm.
And it's crazy. Like,
I think wasn't it in your live the other night? Someone said we're living different timelines. Like there's, there's, of course, we're now living
it was
1930 kind of thing.
Yeah, it was Michael was talking about how crazy it is. We're in such a time warp where we're going back to the essentially stuff we've already been through, and apparently didn't learn our lesson.
Apparently, can I make another shameful plug for the gifts and mostly for the likes? I'd really like to get to 20,000 on my second episode here of the navigation station. Just tapping is clapping. Just go ahead and just.
Can I make just a quick comment about somebody in the comments that said it's biblical that the wife be submissive to her husband? No, it's not.
Be submissive.
What? No. It is biblical that the husband and wife discuss the issue, but then it's the husband's responsibility to enact what they have discussed.
Say that again.
It's so the husband and wife, okay, there's some kind of issue going on, right? They discuss it. They have this discussion. They come to a consensus. Biblically, the husband being the cover of the family, it's then the husband's responsibility to enact whatever decision they've come to collectively, to enact that as a covering for the family. But they use those words and they twist those words to make sure that the wife is submissive. That's not what submissive means. But they twist those words all the time. All the time.
Well, what you need to realize is that there are words in that Bible that can be twisted pretty easily. There is a sentence there that says man is the head of the house. And if you're a man that's abusive and oppressive within a religious system, you can go to town with that. Or you could pay more attention to, it's in Corinthians, I believe, where Jesus prescribes all to love and to respect.
Yes.
But there, so it depends on who, like what you're
is doing the interpreting.
That is able to go and have these conversations and discuss these things. But unfortunately, for people who are experiencing abuse, then it may be that the woman has to analyze how the gender role is oppressing her in that particular situation.
Right. Right. But the Bible is used for that tactic,
mm-hmm.
And it makes me mad when people take words that they don't understand or the nuances that they don't understand, and they take their own interpretation and run with it when it's completely wrong. For starters, the whole thing about, Adam and Eve, and it's Eve's fault for the downfall of Adam was right there. He was right there with the snake. He made the choice to bite that apple. It's his fault, not Eve's fault, but they twist it around all the time to blame Eve.
When you're going through, or if you've been abused under a religious system and you start many people walk away from the system, but they still have a level of shame and guilt that they need to work through. So understanding how a system like that looks at race, looks at gender, really, the next person might not be behaving that way, but look at the system. Is the system in general set up to give somebody a power over situation? If God really wrote that book, why would he write something as, knowing and understanding men's faults? Why would they write something that man is the head of the house? Why would a God write that? So those are sort of the questions that took me out of my religious oppressive situation, was, asking those kind of things. And it was feminism that got me to step back and look at how many ways I was being oppressed under the religious systems I was involved in, because there was a couple of them. So it took a lot, because I didn't leave the religious systems because I thought they were wrong. I left because I couldn't live up to the standards. And so I left with a lot of guilt and shame. I'll have to do a conversation about deconstructing religion in someone's life, because it's not uncommon these days, right?
Yeah. And the thing is with the you, it wasn't that you weren't living up to the system. The system written by man has failed mankind.
Correct. Absolutely. And
so you have to turn that thinking around sometimes, and not take it in as something that you're doing, because it wasn't anything you did.
No.
It was exactly what the system did.
Right. And if you can externalize that, if you can start understanding how the system has oppressed, and that you're, maybe you don't need to feel that shame. Maybe this is because somebody has driven this message into you that really isn't true. And so you start deconstructing. That's, related to the religious thing. And there are many, women who face oppressive situations that have nothing to do with religion, but many do, and it's not just the Christian religion either. There's lots of levels of oppression in different religions. But in deconstructing and getting your power back, a big piece of it is understanding where the system has led it's not all of the journey. There's right? But the political is personal, and that's the message of the show here today. Again, I just want to take the time to thank everybody who's making comments here, and there's conversations going back and forth. If anybody wants to come up into the box, we've got, oh my goodness, it's 5 to 3. So I don't have a lot of time. So I'm not going to invite another guest up into the show. But thank you, everybody. We are just 1,300 short likes. If I can get that in the next 5 minutes, the 20,000 goal will be great for Beaver politics, right? So that we can continue to have the algorithm really click our show out there. Would either Lori or Progressive Moose or Glenda, would you like to say a last comment?
I just wanted to say thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so very much for having me up and letting me be part of the conversation. I do have to run. It was very insightful, and I appreciate everybody's comments, and I look forward to your next live.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm feeling very invigorated and motivated from all the conversation here, and I am respectfully to Desiree going to, and to Lori. No, sorry, Addicted. She's dropped out of the box here. But the conversation about how these fights actually started before the feminist movement, I think needs to be how to open the conversation up, right? So that I don't take all the space or to, as you said, Desiree, talk over. I don't want that to be the reality that people take away from this.
Thank you.
Okay. How about you, Lori? Do you have anything else you would like to say?
Well, what I appreciate about today is the different perspectives. There's very different perspectives presented, and that's actually a learning opportunity for me. It also gives me a little more comfort to come back in future, because unfortunately I have a lot of experience with lack of feminism in my daughter's life, or lack of being treated properly. I'm not saying that the way I want to say it. I write better than I speak sometimes, or it depends on my comfort level, but that'll come. Anyway, there is a lot of things to talk about when it comes to women, and how we really are almost at another starting point. We need almost to get back in the fight, all of us, and really push. And that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm forcing myself to get into the conversation. I'm forcing myself to do things that I'm not comfortable with. I'm 72 years old. I'm waiting for surgery. My other hip is really bad, and I don't have any mobility right now. So just being on TikTok is wonderful, but it's also stressful right now. So I'm learning so much. Thank you, all of you, for what you've taught me. Thank you, the missus, because you're so articulate. I can only aspire to be like you, but it's gonna come. And
Yes, you're welcome here anytime. And you know, you used your voice today. Take great pride in that.
thank you.
Right? It all
Yeah.
starts somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I bet you have had a loud voice in many other areas. TikTok might, you know, takes, I know I was really, first time I went on a live, it was scary and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
you've done it, right? And this is all it takes, because you should have dignity when you express your opinion. You should have agency when you express your opinion like that. And we want to celebrate that. We want to celebrate that here. So thank you for joining.
Oh, you're welcome. Most welcome.
And how about you, Progressive? You're the last one still in the box. Would you like to end the show with a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone that did, give their perspectives and come to the conversation. Because as a male, I really want to emphasize, men, we really do need to start listening more. And as being, the stereotypical white middle-aged man, I mean, I'm the most privileged part of this society, and I have a lot to learn, and I have a lot of conversations and knowledge to learn just by listening. So yeah, I encourage all men, whether it's for your mother, for your sister, for your wife, or for a daughter, to understand better how things in terms of the system and how society really does continue to push down women of all creed and, heritage. And it's really time for us to just tell society to cut the shit. I apologize for my language, but it's time to move on and fucking finally make a difference that way.
Yes, and it is our responsibility to respect your gender when you start deconstructing, and to listen as well, because your need to be heard is no different than our need to be heard, because we are people, right? We are people, and it's our gender roles that have created some of the problems that we need to deconstruct. And so when someone like yourself starts to engage in understanding oppression through a different lens, we should all be listening, because what brought you to the table and your story is just as important in terms of that learning process. So I appreciate you coming in and listening. Absolutely. And other men are welcome in here. Any gender is welcome in this room. So I'm going to sign off because it is 3:00, and our tech person, we have to only have a 2-hour, like not only have a 2-hour show, but we upload to YouTube. So this show will be on YouTube, And that'll happen tomorrow. So if you'd like to go back and kind of revisit some of the conversation you had here with me today, that's another way that you could revisit it. And then maybe we can engage in further conversation and further learning. Desiree, I absolutely would love to hear more from your perspective. So I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all, and goodbye from the navigation station. And we'll see you all. And I'm so glad we got to 20,000 likes with only 14 to 15 people in the room the entire time. But if I also want to make this statement, you know, when we go back and look at the stats for a show like this, 14 to 15 people, but probably 500 people, you know, kind of went through the room, and 500 people stayed for like 3 minutes, right? So if you times 500 by 3 minutes, you start realizing that when your conversation is educational and has purpose, everybody leaves with a really good piece of information, not listening to people yelling and screaming at each other and calling each other names. That is the gem that the Beaver Politics show, and all of the shows, that is the gem that we're bringing to TikTok. Anyway, everybody, have a great week. I'll see you on other Beaver Politics. And like I said, I welcome any kind of private DMs to continue conversations. Bye, everybody.